You don't get a say anymore. He's moving in on Friday, and you'll just have to deal with it. She said it casually, leaning against the counter, phone in her hand, already half checked out of the conversation. There was no lead-up, no question, just a statement delivered like a schedule update. We'd been living together for almost 3 years in a rented two-bedroom apartment. Both our names were on the lease. Rent, utilities, internet, groceries, everything was split evenly. Not because we were obsessed with fairness, but because that was the agreement we made when we moved in. Equal responsibility, equal say. The he was a coworker of hers. I'd met him twice. Once at a work happy hour, where he barely acknowledged me, and once when he stopped by to drop something off and lingered way too long in our living room. She'd always brushed off my discomfort, calling him harmless and going through stuff. I asked her to repeat what she just said. She sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. He needs a place, she said. It's temporary. He'll take the couch. I asked how long temporary meant. She shrugged. I asked when she planned to tell me. She said she just did. I asked why she thought this was okay. She finally put her phone down and looked at me like I was missing something obvious. Because I already decided. I reminded her that this wasn't just her apartment. I reminded her that we'd agreed years ago that no one else moved in without both of us being on board. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't emotional. I was stating facts. She crossed her arms. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I told her I wasn't comfortable sharing my home with someone I didn't agree to live with, especially someone from her work, especially someone she clearly felt responsible for in ways she didn't want to define. She smirked. What, are you jealous now? That was the first time I felt something shut off. Not anger, not hurt, just a realization that this conversation wasn't happening in good faith. I asked if she'd talked to the landlord. She said no. I asked if the rent was going to be adjusted since a third adult would be living there. She laughed and said, "Don't be cheap." I told her this wasn't about money. She said everything was about money with me when it was inconvenient for her. Then she said it, calmly, flatly, like she was proud of it. If you don't like it, you can figure something else out. I'm not changing my plans. That was the ultimatum. Live with it or leave. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, standing in the apartment we both paid for, already mentally rearranging furniture for someone who wasn't me. She took my silence as agreement, or surrender. She went back to her phone and started texting, smiling to herself. I caught fragments as she spoke out loud. Yeah, Friday still works. No, he's fine. I told him already. I went into the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to map out how we'd gotten there. When partnership turned into permission, when discussion turned into orders. That night I slept on the couch. Not out of protest, out of distance. The next morning I went to work like normal. I didn't text her. I didn't bring it up again. There was nothing left to say. The decision had been made, and it hadn't included me. On my lunch break, I pulled up our lease on my phone. I read it slowly this time, not skimming, every clause, every responsibility, every line that people assume won't matter until it does. Both names, joint responsibility, no additional occupants without written approval, no subletting, no exceptions. After work, I emailed the landlord. Neutral tone, short message. I asked about policies regarding additional occupants and lease compliance. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I didn't explain my situation. I just asked. The reply came the next day, clear and professional. Any additional occupant not listed on the lease required written approval. Unauthorized occupants were considered a violation and could result in termination. I didn't forward it. I didn't confront her. I didn't argue. Thursday night, I packed a bag. Just clothes, documents, my laptop, and a few things I didn't want to replace. I left everything else where it was. She noticed the bag by the door and asked where I was going. Staying with a friend, I said. She rolled her eyes. You're still being dramatic. I picked up the bag and paused at the door. Enjoy Friday, I said. She laughed, thinking she'd won. She had no idea what Friday was actually going to look like. I stayed with a friend across town. Nothing dramatic. Couch, spare key, quiet. I didn't block her. I didn't announce anything. I just stopped participating. Friday morning, my phone buzzed. One message. Are you seriously not coming home tonight? I didn't answer. Around noon, another one came through. He's here early. This is ridiculous. Still nothing from me. I wasn't trying to punish her. I just wasn't going to argue anymore. She'd already made it clear that my input didn't matter, so I removed it entirely. By mid-afternoon, she called. I let it ring. Then again. Then a third time. I finally answered on the fourth. What is wrong with you? She snapped the second I picked up. No hello. No concern. Just irritation. I asked if everything was okay. She scoffed. No, everything is not okay. The landlord emailed me. That was the first crack. She read it to me, half yelling, half confused. Unauthorized occupant. Lease violation. Immediate compliance required. Either the additional person left or the lease would be terminated. She accused me of setting her up. I didn't deny emailing the landlord. I told her I'd asked a question. I told her I'd needed clarity. You went behind my back, she said. I reminded her she'd gone ahead without me first. She said I was being petty. I said I was being careful. She said I was ruining everything. I said I was protecting myself. Then she tried to pivot. Okay, fine, she said. He'll just stay a few nights. They don't need to know. I told her I wasn't interested in violating a lease I was legally tied to. She told me to relax. I told her I wasn't coming back to the apartment if he was there. There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background. Boxes shifting, someone asking where to put something. She lowered her voice. So you're really choosing this? I told her she'd already chosen. I was just responding. That's when she doubled down. If you don't come home, you're still responsible for your half of everything. Rent's due next week. I let that sit for a second. Then I told her I'd already spoken to the landlord again, that I'd asked about my options if the lease was being violated by another tenant. Her voice changed, not angry, worried. I explained calmly. If the lease was terminated due to violation, I wouldn't be liable for future rent. If I vacated and documented the violation, I could remove myself from the situation entirely. She told me I was bluffing. I forwarded her the email. The call ended shortly after that. I didn't go back that night, or the next. I went by once during the day while she was at work. I took the rest of my personal things, clothes, tools, a few pieces of furniture I'd paid for. I left the apartment clean. I taped a copy of the landlord's email to the fridge. No note, no explanation. That evening, she texted me pictures. The boxes were gone. The coworker wasn't there anymore. She wrote, "Happy now?" I didn't reply. 2 days later, she asked if we could talk. I said there was nothing left to discuss. She said we needed to figure out rent. I told her she needed to talk to the landlord. By the end of the week, the landlord scheduled an inspection. Routine, they said. Just to confirm compliance. I didn't attend. I got a separate email confirming my notice to vacate had been accepted due to lease violation. 30 days. No penalties. Clean exit. That was the first real consequence. She lost control of the situation she'd assumed she owned. And I was already gone. Final update. For the first few days after I left, there was nothing. No angry messages, no dramatic apologies, just silence. It was the kind of silence that only happens when someone is trying to regain control and hasn't figured out how yet. Then the practical text started. Are you still paying your half of the internet? Which day are you officially off the lease? Did you change your mailing address? I answered only what affected me directly. Short replies, dates, yes or no. I didn't ask how she was doing, and she didn't ask where I was staying. The relationship had already been reduced to logistics. The landlord's inspection happened the following week. I wasn't present, but I was copied on the email afterward. The apartment was technically back in compliance. No unauthorized occupants, no visible issues. But the tone of the message had changed. They informed her that when the lease expired, renewal would require a new application. Income verification, credit check, no joint lease option. In other words, she was on her own now. That night, she texted me at almost midnight. Can you please just come talk to them with me? They're not being reasonable. I didn't respond. The next day, she tried again, this time softer. I didn't think it would turn into this. I thought they'd just warn us. I believed her. She'd never thought past Friday. She'd assumed momentum would carry her through. like it always had. A few days later, she admitted the part she'd been avoiding. She couldn't afford the apartment by herself. Rent had increased since we signed together. Utilities alone were more than she'd expected. She asked if I'd consider moving back in once. Things calmed down. I told her I'd already signed a short-term lease elsewhere. That was the truth. Smaller place, older building, fewer amenities. But it was mine. Quiet, predictable. No surprises waiting in the kitchen. Her replies became slower after that. She complained about the landlord being inflexible, about work stress, about feeling overwhelmed. She mentioned that her coworker had stopped answering her messages once it became clear he couldn't stay. Apparently, he'd found another option within days. The urgency she'd treated as an emergency vanished the moment it required actual effort from him. I didn't comment on that. It wasn't my role anymore. 2 weeks before the end of the month, she sent another message. This one direct. They rejected my application. I have to move. She asked if I could help cover one more month of rent so she could figure things out. I said no, not angrily, not defensively, just no. I reminded her that I'd left because a decision had been made without me, and that I wasn't going to take responsibility for outcomes I hadn't agreed to. She didn't argue after that. She just stopped responding. The last time I went back to the apartment was to pick up a package that had been delivered there by mistake. The place already felt temporary. Furniture missing, closet half empty, the walls bare where things used to hang. It didn't feel like something I'd lost. It felt like something that had already ended before I walked away. She wasn't home, and I was relieved. A week later, she sent one final message. No accusations, no bargaining, just a sentence. I really didn't think you'd actually leave. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to explain. I'd been clear from the start. She just assumed my boundaries were negotiable. I moved forward quietly. New routines, new address, no shared expenses, no shared space, no need to monitor anyone else's decisions. The consequences unfolded on their own, exactly as they were always going to. All I did was step aside and let them happen.